watching, or whoever's watching, or will watch, X-Plane keeps crashing on me, so I'm kind of over it. But in the meantime, I think we're gonna just kind of wanted to do a little quick thing about flying Oceanic, and not like an instructional thing, but just kind of go over some highlights about what it's kind of like, what it's going through, you know, what goes into the planning of it and the flying of it. I thought that might be interesting. Just kind of very broad brush over that as we're flying right now from Bradley. Pull this up. And we're going to be flying the organized track system in the North Atlantic, which we'll talk about, all the way over to Donington, which is actually EGNX. And when you're actually racing at Donington, they do have the planes that fly right over the track, and you'll see them, especially as you're coming down the back of the, headed east there in the back of the track. You'll see them taking off runway 27 right over the track in iRacing, which is I thought was pretty cool. So we'll go and land at East Midlands. The way that this is going right now, I don't anticipate making it the whole way because X-Plane keeps crashing, but it is what it is, and we'll do what we can. But yeah, that's the track. That's the airport we'll be landing at. And I used Bing Maps because this is what basically the data that the new Microsoft Flight Simulator is going to use. And I would assume then, I'm hopeful that this would all show up and you'd be able to navigate based off of that, which I thought was pretty cool. Hopefully that holds true. I guarantee you it's not an X-Plane. Not a knock on X-Plane, but I'm just very excited for August 18th. So there's our route of flight. If we bring up the high en route map, you'll kind of see, we'll talk a little bit about, oceanic entry and clearances, but this right here, this whole mess, are the transition routes, the North American transition routes, and these are things you can file. They will be recommended, and it kind of keeps everything organized for traffic headed across the ocean. I'll explain. This is actually from a few days ago, but this is one of the NAT tracks that was active during that time, so I just used that, so I don't have to go back and replot it. And then I just chose a straight shot over to East Midlands there. So that's probably not going to end up flying that whole thing, but that was the idea. And behind it, so as you can see here, we're getting leveled off. We're going to do 34,000 feet, flight level 340 for the trip over there. And I have the flight loaded up in the FMS. But first, I wanted to bring up, so when you're going in and you're planning a oceanic flight, you don't have to use the North Atlantic tracks, the NATs, but they're typically used to keep traffic organized, and you can do random routes if you want, but this is typically, you're going to find yourself on one of these. They're published daily in the NOTAMs, and it looks, if you're not used to flying, it looks kind of like a bunch of gibberish, but this is pretty standard NOTAM stuff. Here, for eastbound, it's basically driven by when airline flights go. It's so going eastbound, you're going to find that the NATs are active. Basically, they take off in the evening or at night and go eastbound. So you arrive in Europe in the morning, and then westbound ones are kind of the opposite. So you leave in the morning, head westbound, and arrive in the morning as well. But what I used down here You can see we're not actually good. This is not the active times that it would have been anyway on the 21st, but what you're looking at here, eastbound levels, and I picked Yankee. So there's only one option right here. There is Zulu down there, but I picked Yankee, the first one. You can see the route of flight here. These are latitudes and longitudes. Lat longs are those two numbers. So north and west in this case. And then these are the flight levels that you can fly. I picked that second one there, 340, based on our experience last time of trying to climb to 360 and not really working out well. And then this is the NAR. That's that transition route that I was talking about, and I chose, I believe it was 374 alpha. It may have been 443 alpha. I honestly don't remember now. But those are described in different flight publications, the exact routing, but honestly on this one I just used the map that I showed you there to figure out what it was. And in the FMS even, these are official things, so when you look at how it's entered, it starts at Alex there. Oops, I guess I gotta swap that around. It starts at Alex, but when you enter it in here, it's via 437 alpha to tune up. So this FMS is going to load all those intermediate points. That track, that transition track, is actually in the database. So when in the flight plan, it looks like Alex and the two depths your very next spot. However, when you go into legs, oh, never mind. I guess it is the very next spot. Disregard that, but that, much like air routes and stuff, that's how it's gonna, you can just load in the name of the route and it'll load everything up, which is pretty cool. So anyway, yep, we'll come back here. So when you're planning your flight, you're gonna wanna look at the net message. These are in the NOTAMs. It's gonna describe what the routing is. And then when you get your clearance, we'll talk about that in a little bit. You know, it's Nat Yankee, and then you know exactly what the route is. And then you have other remarks down here. The TMI is not too much information. Track message indicator, I think. I don't remember, but 203, that's gonna make sure that you're identified that, you know, these letters here may repeat. So you need to make sure that you're on the TMI to know that that is the same routing. If you want to say Yankee, that the controllers are talking about, and really all that is the Julian day of the year. So this is on the 203 day, and then other information that you may need to know about flying that track, which isn't super important. I'm not going to cover all that, but so in theory here, as you're flying along about 30 minutes prior, oops. We've sped up a bit. Why won't it? Those are on. Weird. Alright, well, we'll figure that out. So this is our entry point to the NAR. The routing, that's the exit point at 2-dep, and that's also where we're going to start our oceanic portion. So the differences here are when you're on the ground and you say we were doing, like we were last time, flying from Connecticut to California, we would basically get our clearance, our IFR clearance, and that would clear us all the way to our destination. When we're on the ground in Connecticut this time, though, we're going to get a clearance and we will get cleared to our destination, but not really, because your oceanic clearance is separate really from all of that. So you basically get cleared this part, the first part, and then this last part here. And as you're going along on cruise, you'll have a little checklist and you'll be going through, but you basically need to get your oceanic clearance. Now, when I started doing this, it was a lot more difficult. There's these this new technology now called CPDLC, where you basically can communicate with air traffic control via text message on your FMS. And we just recently got it. It's actually been around for a while for most airlines and cargo companies and stuff like that, but you can either get it through there, or you can use a VHF radio while you're still within range. In this case, it would be Gander radio. So you call in and get your Oceanic clearance through them, and they'd give you the routing, which in this case will be, for us, it'll be the Nat Yankee, the altitude, the speed, Mach 0.8 for us today, and then some frequencies to use. So that's an important point to note when getting your clearance. Once you get out of radar contact, because those you're basically controlled by ground radars, right? They can see you, they can ping you, and CPDLC actually will allow controllers to do that as well. But once you're out of that radar range, and they can't see you in radar anymore, you're going to be kind of out on your own. But they know where you're at, and I would say I keep saying the old school days, but before CPDLC, that was kind of how they did it. They knew where you were at what point and what speed you were going, and so that they could infer based on that, and you would make position reports at each of these points. And if you're going to be more than like 3 minutes off, you would estimate the next point and then the point after. So the next 2 points, you'd give an estimate for when you were going to hit those. And if you were going to be more than 3 minutes off, you would have to call in and basically update your ETA, so they would be able to plot you as you went. And you'd be doing all that over HF radio, or high frequency radio, which was always a pain in the butt to listen to, and of varying reliability, at least in my experience. When it worked fantastic, but a lot of interference potential there. And let's see, anything else interesting about that? Not really, I guess. Yeah, so now with the better technologies, you're able to communicate via text message. You can send, if you're out here in the middle of nowhere, you can send a request to change altitudes. As you start burning down fuel, you can climb to be more fuel efficient. You can request diversions around weather, et cetera, and it's automatically sending your position reports to the controllers so they know where you're at. So there's really not much you can do or have to do, although I built my habits from a time period where that technology didn't exist, and we would have a map that looked very similar to this, and you'd be doing navigation checks. You check all of your navigation. There's different aircraft have different navigation systems, but you check all of them, all the redundancies, and you'd plot them exactly so you could see if maybe your INUs were drifting, if your GPS was acting up, all that stuff, and there'd be something constantly happening for you to double check as you go. And then you'd be obviously making those position reports over the HF radio as you went. And they did have a capability on the HF. It was called cell call or selective call, so that you could basically put it in a sort of a mute mode, so you didn't have to listen to all the as you were crossing the ocean. And they would be able to ping you, and you'd get like a doorbell sound in the cockpit when they wanted to chat, if they had a question or a request for you. The controllers did. So that worked about 7 times out of 10 though. So sometimes, you'd just be sitting there listening to HF radios the whole way over, which got kind of annoying. You can see here, these are the FIRS, the flight information regions. So this is controlled by Gander, and then this is Shanwick. And Shanwick is not a real place, but it is a combination of Shannon and Prestwick. So they call it Shanwick, and they kind of share responsibilities for that. So those are the two popular, and this is right here, 30 west, the longitude. And that's important because that's a pretty popular one. That's where you change from Gander to Shanwick, and some people call it the Molson Guinness line. So yeah, if you're a passenger, obviously if you're not flying, but next time you go in Oceanic, you cross that 30 West, you know, you can have a Molson over here and then a Guinness over here. And kind of a bad dad joke, but that's what they call it. Anything else about that? Let's see, did I have any other windows open? I don't think so. I think that's kind of it's not too bad actually, you know, once you get a hang of it, flying Oceanic, especially now with the technology nowadays. But I just thought it would be interesting, you know, there are organized systems and tracks to go get you across the ocean and back, and that's just kind of what the pilots see and what they're thinking about as they're going across. When you get over into England's airspace here, for ICAO rules, they have operational air traffic and general air traffic. General air traffic is mainly for most people. Operational air traffic is mainly military aircraft, and that's kind of a throwback to when you only had TACANs to navigate and maybe couldn't comply with necessarily all the rules, so you'd be put with different controllers, and they basically try to separate you and keep the riffraff out from the general air traffic. And so we would often fly the operational air traffic and weren't bothering with the civilian traffic as much in the airlines and all that. But they do differentiate that. They do not make that distinction over in the United States. So I think that's about it as far as oceanic planning goes. You know, they do have oh, actually, one thing that might also be interesting, equal time points. So you're flying across, there aren't a lot of, you know, if you have a problem or emergency or you gotta get on the ground quickly, you can see there just isn't a ton of options for you out here. You're in the middle of the ocean. So what you do is you calculate before you go, part of the mission planning is an equal time point. Now, it would make sense, right, if you're geographically halfway between, you know, if you had a divert airport on the east coast of Canada here, and then, you know, probably something in Ireland, probably Shannon's, you know, one of the more popular ones. But if you were halfway between those 2 points, that would be your decision point. Like, have I made it halfway yet? No. Okay, I'm going to turn back and head back to Canada. Or have I made it past halfway? Yeah. But that doesn't take into account the winds, which famously blow from west to east, and, you know, depending on where the jet stream is, they could be very, very strong winds. So halfway isn't technically halfway flying time, and so you got to take the winds into account. So yeah, if you were halfway, geographically halfway with strong winds, and you had to turn around and fly into those winds, you're better off actually, you know, just continuing on, because it's going to take you less time to get back over to Shannon. And there's a formula that you use, and I'm sure that it's all computer generated now, but it'll show you exactly, and it's probably going to be somewhere on the west side of geographic center, when it makes sense to just continue on, or when you turn around. And then the other, there's 2 equal time points that you calculate. One is for at cruising altitude with those winds, but there may be an issue where you're unable to maintain pressurization in the aircraft. Either that's the issue itself, or it's a symptom of the you know, technical problem you're having, not maintaining pressurization, which becomes a problem with oxygen. And you're probably not going to have enough oxygen on board to keep the cockpit crew awake, much less the passengers using those drop-down masks. So you calculate one for 10,000 feet as well. So if you have an issue, you need to descend to make sure everybody can breathe. There's a equal time point that's calculated for that, of, hey, at what point do I just continue on, and at what point do I turn back? And the other part of that is you're going to be burning at 10,000 feet, the lower altitudes, you burn a lot more fuel. You're much less fuel efficient than at altitude. That's how the engines are designed. this to be maximum efficiency at altitude. So you also need to figure out, okay, well, if I'm at that point, what's the worst case scenario of how much fuel I'm going to burn with my decision point? And then that may actually drive a higher, even though you can make the whole flight with, I'm just using random numbers here, but 100,000 pounds of fuel. But you don't have enough fuel at this point to descend to 10,000 feet and continue on or make it back, then you'll actually bump up your ramp fuel to make sure that you do have enough fuel if that were to happen. So lots of things that you got to think about going into the flight, but ultimately, hoping to keep you safe and keep options open in the event of an emergency. But yeah, that's basically it. So this is, right around here, or no later than around here, we'd be calling up Gander to get our oceanic clearance, make sure that we were going to be at the right altitude and airspeed, and we're all on the same page of what track we're taking. And after that, they're going to notify you at some point, probably over here, that radar contact is lost. So you'll squawk 4,000, and you're on your own at that point. As you go across the ocean, cruising, again, you're just kind of double checking your equal time point, your navigation solutions are accurate, and yeah, that's it until you get back into radar or radio contact on the east side here with Shannon, and then they're gonna clear you. You've already been cleared this, but they'll like re-clear you or let you know of any changes to your route clearance for the rest of your flight to your destination. That's about it. Had some notes here of things that might be interesting, but covered most everything. Yeah. So Nats can get pretty busy, and again, they're meant for traffic flow and control. You have all those airlines, taking off the East Coast, trying to make it over to Europe at the exact same time. Kind of makes it necessary, and you also want reduced separation capabilities. So with increased separation requirements, obviously you got to space everybody out a little bit more, and it kind of creates bottlenecks on the departure and arrival side. So, actually, I guess that would just be the departure side. But outside of that, other things to think about. You need diplomatic clearances into the locations that you're going, and it's not as big of a deal. Just going into Ireland and England and all that, but you get into Europe and further east, and things get a little more interesting. You also want to think about, so the only real divert options, at least that we had, Greenland and Iceland, the Azores are down here. That's about it, and you can see that's not really a short flight either way you go. And the water's quite cold up here, so you want to make sure that you've got enough fuel to make it. I think that's it. So we look back here, we're cruising along. This FMS again is just slightly different. I would expect to see ETAs for all this on this page. This is normally where you'd get the ETAs for your upcoming points to pass along, but they don't simulate that in X-Plane, which is fine. But that is it. Other things you need to do, you're cross-checking your altimeters, all three of them. This is your standby. This usually has electronic data fed into it, your primaries. This is straight pedostatic system, and it will typically work off the standby, the emergency bus. So if these go to crap, you'll at least have that. So you want to make sure that it's actually working. So if you do have some sort of issue, it will not be a big deal. Although I think our tonsors were 300 feet you could be off. So just keep, you know, on your standby, it could be off by up to 300 feet at altitude and still be technically within limits. Same thing with the airspeed as well. Yeah, other than that, it's, you know, a lot of keeping an update on your navigation and just trying to stay out of conversations with your co-pilot about politics, money, religion, that sort of thing. Oh, nice. We've got a Lodges local here. That's great. I've only been to Lodges one time, and I really enjoyed it. I honestly didn't want to leave. We ended up going to this little bar / restaurant, and everybody was just sitting there watching soccer, having a great time, and it's a gorgeous town. But yeah, man, getting to live there, I got to imagine at some point it's got to be a little bit of island fever, but that's awesome. I honestly don't know that I've ever met somebody who has family in Lodges. That's great. Oh, awesome, man. I was gonna say Rough Rider. I think I have a problem with the YouTube handles, but yeah. What's up, Justin? How's it going, man? That's did he grow up there? Did you guys, or did he just like move out there? I mean, I don't blame him either, or for moving out there either way. Like I said, one time I got to go there, it was quite awesome. Wow, that is really cool. I think you're the first person I know from the Azores. And if I'm not mistaken, that's it's a Portuguese territory, right? I might have that wrong. Yeah, we might have. Maybe we will do a little divert there over to Lodges and grab some of your dad's coffee. That's awesome. Yeah, I need some myself. Yeah, we'll see. I tried to fire it up twice already, and X-Plane just kind of crapped out on me. So I'm not holding my breath that it'll survive all the way to Donington, but at least maybe worst case scenario, just put myself on a 10-mile final or something like that. We can do the landing. Cool. That is really cool. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about X-Plane, if this is a known issue or not. I probably need to go look. They have I'm sure they have forums or a subreddit somewhere. Go see if people are having the same issues I am, but I'm not. I don't want to. It's a fine flight simulator and it'll scratch your itch, but I think just, you know, playing it a little bit more, I think I'm just ready. Even if Microsoft doesn't live up to all the hype, it can't be any less of a simulator than the next plane. Unfortunately, I think they do a really good job with the flight models, I'm sure, but as far as the world and the environment and stuff, it's you know, it's just an older game. So you mean for the plans for the flight? Sorry, I hate making everybody type. Kind of pain in the butt. I think. Sorry, I'm working on something right here too. I think there's a way to. So a recap of the plane that I'm flying? So this is the MD-82. I got it in the last delivery. This is kind of an older plane. The MD-82 is an upgraded model of the MD-80 with the better engines, I believe, is the main thing. It's a McDonnell Douglas, obviously, MD. It's a pretty docile aircraft. And I haven't found it too difficult to fly when I'm hand flying it. It kind of, you know, it rolls a bit slow, but it's very stable and you know, forgiving flight characteristics. One thing I think it was Robert was pointing out last time is just how kind of ancient, relatively speaking, the systems are. You know, when you look up a lot of these gauges and switches and whatever in newer aircraft are literally all this is all maybe going to be circuit breakers that you'd find, and it's all self-contained in the actual displays itself. You know, you navigate through it all on there. But I like this because this is very similar to the plane that I used to fly. Now, a lot of this, the electrics, hydraulics, pneumatics, was actually, so the plane I flew was a little bit bigger, and there was a position right here where a flight engineer would sit, and you could actually, like, there is a huge panel, probably twice that size, that the flight engineer would control all of those systems for the two pilots. And that being said, though, it's not too far off. And it was just a little more complicated. We had a little bit. Obviously, we had 3 engines, and then just a lot more redundancy on some of the on some of the systems. And the fuel, because we are an air refueler, the fuel system was, I don't say super complicated, but certainly much more so than what you'll find here. I mean, literally you have control over 6 pumps, and that's about it. So outside of that, yeah, I like it because it's just a good reminder of how everything interacts, and this is something else the KC-10 was good at. You know, that you would basically have these switches, but they would draw the system maps to some extent. I mean, it's obviously very simplified, but you know, if you wanted to get something like your right AC bus running, you could actually follow, even if you knew nothing, you'd be able to follow the diagram on the switches itself to figure out, okay, well, this generator is in op. So how can I do that? Let's start the APU and turn that on, and I know that's going to power my right AC bus as well if you got something on there that you need. So they did that to the fuel system as well on the KC-10. Obviously not so much here. It's a little simplified, but same concepts. And then the other thing I like about flying the older planes is it, again, just kind of reminds you of what each system is actually doing, because you got that visual of it, and you're controlling a little more granular on the system itself versus, you know, I want to start the engine, I'm going to hit this button. You know, you actually got to think about what you need to either start to actually fly or to fix a problem that you have on it. But yeah, I mean, they did a pretty good job with it. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect. It's part of the base package. I'm sure there's MD-80s out there from third parties that do a little bit more of the systems and make sure they're simulated. I did see there was one that was like $60 where they actually did simulate the thrust rating computer, which I thought was pretty cool. Gives you just that added immersion. And obviously, like, you know, I can click on the CDU here, but I've got nothing over here. I can't really control too much about what's happening on the EHSI and EADI, but whatever. It's a nice, you know, if you have X-Plane and you wanna go somewhere medium distance, I think it's a great fun aircraft to fly, not super complicated, and you know, if you kind of work through it, you kind of end up learning a little bit too as you go, which I thought was pretty cool. So real quick, I'll bring up too, we're now on the NAR, the transition route, although I don't know where George is taking us. It does not appear that we are on the same track, which is interesting. I think that may be the issue. So you can see on the actual chart the route that we're supposed to be flying. And it does not appear there are any intermediate waypoints like I thought there were. It does look like pretty much a straight shot to our coast out point, which is Tudor. Or TUDEP, sorry. You can see all the coast out points here. And we appear to be going some other direction, even though it says we're going to TUDEP. Anyway. Let's see. I think other things about this, ooh, do we have actually a weather radar? No, it doesn't look like it. Oh well. So let's see, who else can we talk about this jet? Obviously you got your throttles here. It does have thrust reverse. This is your speed brake. There's detents here for descent, and a rule of thumb that I was always taught is speed brakes are only for if the controller messes up. So you need to be able to plan your descents appropriately. If you're using the speed brakes and the controller gave you plenty of time to descend, then that means you've done messed up. But yep, you can use those. It helps. Basically, they're actually I could probably show you. It's really gonna mess with the jet, but what are you gonna do? So you can hear it struggling already. But there are these flaps that raise up on the wing to basically spoil the lift. And that's really all they do. Jet does not like it when you have them out. And this position right here, you can see it pull up, that's armed. So typically what'll happen, I don't know how it works in this jet, but when you arm them for landing, yes, yep, speed brakes, air brakes, whatever you want to call them. They work differently in different aircraft, but that's, yeah, it's the same general idea. When you arm them for landing, they're gonna basically extend a little bit when you get main gear spin up, and then once the nose wheel comes down, they'll extend even more, and that's basically just to help plant the aircraft on the ground so you don't float it or bounce it or stuff like that, which is pretty cool. You can see this moving right here. Oops. This moving right here is the trim handle. So we've got autopilot on, so it's automatically trimming for us right now. This is usually secondary on your yoke. These are going to be your trim switches, but if those stop working for whatever reason, you can use this, what they call the suitcase handles, to move the trim up and down. I think it runs off a different bus. So if you have electrical issues, it gives you a little more control, which is huge. This is a flap pre-selector right here for takeoff. When you run your takeoff and landing data, it'll drive a flap setting to use, and sometimes it's going to be different than what you have. And that's so on this plane, looks like specifically you have 0, 11, and 15, and your takeoff and landing data may drive you to use something different. It doesn't look like it simulates it here, but you dial that in, and then it creates a stop gate for your flaps. So when you're extending it, it'll stop at the appropriate flaps. These also control your slats, which are, I don't know what everybody's familiarity with any of these stuff are, so flaps are on the back end, they drop down. I think most people are familiar with that, but slats actually come out of the front end, and they elongate and kind of drop forward and down to create more of a round wing, if you will. I don't know how to describe it. Basically to give you a little bit more lift and help you on your slower speed controllability. And there's a takeoff setting and a landing setting, and that's really all you get. Up, takeoff, or land, and it's controlled. It basically slaves it to these flap settings for you. Oh, it looks like that's, yeah. So you spin that, shows you what you've selected for your flap takeoff setting right there. These are the VHF. This is pilot and co-pilot's radios for VHF, ADF. This is more of a navigation. So this is talking to ATC or whoever. This is navigation. Not many people even use the ADF anymore, which this is a very prominent display and control system for an ADF. Usually it's more of an afterthought now, just because it's a very precision. It's basically, it points an arrow over here in the relative direction of where the signal's coming from, and that's it. It gives you bearing information only. And so nowadays with GPS and all that, it's not as useful, but still good to have. That's your transponder. That's what allows you, when you're in radar contact for ATC, to see you. And actually, we should be on 4,000, or we will be shortly, so I'll just change that. That's about it. You look, yeah, rudder trim right here, little wheel knob to, if you need to trim out, either bent jet or whatever. Auto brakes, that's used for rejected takeoffs and landings. We did not have an auto brake system, so I'm not going to pretend to know how that works exactly. Gear cutoff, at least for us, there was a certain airspeed. If you had flaps out while you're maneuvering and the throttles came back below a certain airspeed, it would sound the gear horn to let you know that it looks like you're configured for landing and you're trying to land, but your gear's not down. So it uses airspeed and flap configuration to trigger it to be like, hey dummy, are you sure that's where you want to be with your throttles and your flaps when your gear's not down? But there are certain scenarios where you are maneuvering to land where it is appropriate, so they give you the cutoff there. But yeah, you basically do have to think about it and hit it. And that's just to reduce any sort of shenanigans. Let's see. Yeah, as we continue our slow detour from whatever this had planned for us. It's quite a long flight, so I'll probably cut the stream here short and just pick it back up at Donington. But yeah, that's the gist of it. We do have, they do a pretty good job of simulating the APU, auxiliary power unit, which is basically just another jet engine that sits typically in the rear of the aircraft in its own little fireproof box. But that it provides you not with thrust, but the electricity, so you can, it's got its own engine, quote unquote, generator. So if you lost all power on your engine-driven generators or what have you, batteries, you could actually fire up the APU and run all your electronics off of that. It also provides bleed air. It won't necessarily, depending on the APU, but typically it's not going to pressurize the cabin, but it'll help with engine starts and stuff like that. So typically that's one of the things that we would look at when we had a engine failure or flame out. One of the decision steps was, hey, do you want to start your APU, to kind of help with that electric load / potential engine restart. Yeah, that's about all I got right now. Thought the oceanic flying would be, it's boring, but also like the planning part is the interesting part. The actual flying of it is quite boring, especially when they're not simulating certain things. Like we don't have CPDLC or HF radios, so there's really no way to show exactly what would actually be happening in either old school or new school. So I'm really curious to see if Microsoft has made an account for that. Yeah, man. Well, I think it's going to be boring from here on out, so I'm going to stop the stream. We'll probably fast forward over to Donington and maybe do the approach, see if they actually modeled Donington Raceway, which I doubt. Or circuit or whatever it's called, but there we go. That's oceanic flying in a gist and in the MD-80, but I guess we'll see you guys in maybe I'll pick it up over Ireland or something like that, so we can talk a little bit about ICAO flying and whatnot, and get more excited about more flight simulators coming out, and then the race, which I'm looking forward to. I know it's a fast track, and it sounds like there's been some shenanigans in the public races. I have not done a public race yet, and I'm kind of nervous too at Donington, but I might give it a shot. Just start in the back and kind of see what it's like. So I have a little more perspective for the broadcast since I didn't get to do any of the practice races, the Sunday night Skippy practice races this week. But yeah, man. Well, awesome to see you, Justin. Good luck tonight if we don't talk again, and thanks for sharing that info with about your parents. That's really cool. That is actually really cool. So very unique. And we will see you guys, I guess, a little bit later. Have an awesome rest of your Sunday.